I want you to picture this: a man holding his newborn son in his arms. The baby is only hours old. His wife is resting in the hospital bed, exhausted but smiling. And in that moment, as the tiny fingers curl around his own, he knows exactly what he wants to do. He wants to give his son a name that will carry more than just sound. He wants to give him a name that carries a story, a debt of love, a promise to honor the man who once saved him. But when the name leaves his lips, the room feels colder. Not from his wife. She already knew. She already agreed. But from the world outside their little family. Because the name wasn't culturally appropriate. Because people who never held him when he cried as a child, never fed him when he was hungry, decided to question whether his own son should carry a name that wasn't meant for them. Before we get there, you need to know where that name came from. He grew up in the foster care system, a system that, for many children, feels like a constant revolving door of strangers and uncertainty. But in the middle of that chaos, he found a home, not through adoption, not on paper, but in the way that matters most. An elderly Russian man took him in, a man named Dmitry Petrovich. This man didn't just feed him or give him a roof. He gave him stability. He gave him guidance. He gave him something he didn't even know he was missing until it was there. A steady, dependable presence. Dmitry never had children of his own, but in all the ways that mattered, he treated this boy as a son. And the boy, in turn, carried that bond deep in his heart. Years later, Dmitry passed away. There were no heirs, no children to carry on his name, just memories in the mind of a foster son who never forgot. Time passed. That boy became a man. He met a woman, fell in love, got married, and eventually they had a child of their own, a son. And when it came time to name this child, there was no hesitation. With his wife's full support, they named him Dmitry Petrovich Williams. Williams was his own last name. Petrovich was given as the middle name. It was, for him, a way to honor the man who had shaped him into who he was. But that joy didn't last long. The first backlash came from his wife's extended family. They didn't just dislike the name, they criticized it openly. They said things like, "What kind of name is Dmitry?" Or, "You ain't white, you ain't Russian. Why would you give your son such a white name?" It didn't stop there. When he confided in friends, hoping for understanding, he heard more of the same. That as a black man, he should be proud of his own culture. That by giving his son a name outside of that culture, he was giving the boy an identity he's not even a part of. That the child would have a hard time in school with that name. The words stung, because here's the truth. He never claimed to be Russian. He barely spoke the language. But Dmitry Petrovich wasn't just a cultural figure in his life. He was family. He was a mentor. And the love, the protection, the lessons, those things had no nationality. And yet, everywhere he turned, people who hadn't walked his path, who hadn't been there when he was a child without parents, felt entitled to tell him how to honor the man who had been there. The conflict built quietly at first. Little remarks at family gatherings. Friends half joking, but not really. And then louder, more insistent opinions. Underneath their words was an accusation that he was betraying his heritage. That by choosing this name, he was somehow diminishing his son's connection to being black. But in his mind, that connection came from much more than a name. It came from the way he'd raise his son, the values he'd instill, the history he'd teach, and it came from refusing to limit his son's identity to a single narrative when life itself had been anything but simple. He started to see the layers in their criticism. On the surface, it was about culture, but deeper, it was about control. About who gets to decide what names are allowed for which people. Even so, the pressure weighed on him. Would his son face extra questions? Would he have to explain himself over and over to strangers? Would that story, a beautiful, private family story, be forced into the public eye every time someone asked about his name? But then he remembered. Every time someone asks, his son will have the chance to tell the truth. To say, I'm named after the man who helped raise my dad. To carry that legacy forward. To make the name his own. He also learned something unexpected. When you choose a name for your child, everyone suddenly feels they have the right to approve or reject it. And they don't hesitate to tell you. People will argue about whether it's too common, too unusual, too old-fashioned, too trendy, too ethnic, not ethnic enough, and maybe the most telling thing, many of the same people criticizing him for giving his black son a white name had no problem with black kids named Samuel or John or Clarence, names that also didn't originate in African culture. One pattern became clear. The judgment wasn't really about names. It was about perceptions of race, identity, and who gets to cross which invisible cultural lines. The tension hit a turning point when he realized something. The only two people whose opinions truly mattered, his and his wife's, were in agreement. They loved the name. They loved the reason behind it. And they were the ones who would raise this child. That clarity brought calm. And so he decided the name would stay. Still, the fallout remained. His wife's family was not happy. Some friends pulled back. Conversations about the name became quiet but tense, like a subject you don't bring up unless you're ready for an argument. But he stood firm. And in the quiet moments, holding his son, he knew why. Because the man whose name his son carried, Dmitry Petrovich, had stepped in when no one else did, had given him more than shelter, had given him a sense of worth, a sense of belonging. And if his son grew up to have even a fraction of that man's character, he would consider it a victory. And so now he asks, with the criticism still ringing in his ears, with family relationships still strained, with friends' opinions still heavy on his mind. So, am I the asshole? And here's my reflection, as your host. When I hear this story, I hear more than a debate about names. I hear a deeper question. Who gets to decide what parts of our history we carry forward? Is it defined by skin color? By language? By the borders on a map? Or is it defined by the moments and people who shaped us? Sometimes honoring your past doesn't mean staying inside the boundaries other people draw for you. Sometimes it means stepping over them and planting a flag in the place where your real story happened. This isn't just about a name. It's about ownership of your own narrative, about refusing to let others dictate what's authentic for you. So I'll leave you with this. If you had the chance to name your child after the person who gave you the love and guidance you needed most, but they weren't from your culture, would you do it anyway? Or would you bend to the pressure of people who weren't there when you needed them? Let's talk about it.